Members, we have a quorum. I call to order the meeting. First of all, confirmation of minutes of the last meeting. The Secretary has not received any proposals for amendments. Can we confirm the minutes, please? Thank you. Information paper issued since the last meeting. There were quite a number of them, and it's on the agenda. Date of next meeting will be on the 21st of June. There are 2 items proposed for discussion. And then Mr. Tang Ka-piu would like to have a discussion on the wrongful deduction on the octopus card. I've actually received another letter recently that asked us to talk about, the station, the octopus station. So we'll see whether we'll include that item. Next item, street lighting. Next meeting, there are 2 items to cover: street trade lighting, and also recycling of materials on the road service maintenance and repair. The TAVR scheme, it doesn't cover marine accident, and there's had many discussions at District Council. After the Lam Island incident, administration promised to include marine accident in the TAVR scheme, but can it come back? Can we ask the administration to give a report? Yes, we'll write to the administration about the compensation for marine accidents, maritime accidents, and we'll ask them for the latest progress, and then we will put it on the list of outstanding items. Next meeting, 21st of June, 10:45. We have decided on 2 items that I mentioned just now, and then I would talk to the Secretary to see whether we include the item on the octopus card as well. Next, we move on to item 4 on the agenda, average speed camera system trial scheme. Administration. Can we invite them in, please? Members, we do have a long agenda, 4 items. There are 2 items on the toll collection system at the toll plazas of the Chiang Mai control area, and another item is construction of additional floors on central piers. All these items will go to the PWSC, the Public Works Subcommittee. So please be concise in making your points, otherwise we might not be able to cover the agenda again. Under Secretary, welcome to the meeting. I'm not going to introduce all the representatives present. We mentioned the 2 items we're going to cover at the next meeting: street lighting in Hong Kong and recycling of asphalt pavement in road maintenance. And now this item is average speed camera system trial scheme. Under Secretary, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief by way of introduction. Speeding has always been road safety concern issue in Hong Kong. Such a lawful act endangers not only the driver and passengers of vehicle concerned, but also other road users. We want to further curb speeding and combat speeding behavior as well, so we want to enhance our speed enforcement actions. Now, we rely mostly on speed cameras to combat speeding behavior, and these cameras are installed on roads to collect data. The range covered by cameras is relatively short, So drivers may slow down as they approach a camera, and then after they pass the camera, they will speed up again. So the cameras could only serve limited deterrent effect. It's not entirely satisfactory. We want to enhance speed enforcement actions. We propose to install average speed camera system. It could monitor speed over a longer distance. That is the average speed. This will deal with cases of drivers slowing down and picking up speed again. Average speed camera system. We propose to try it out at the Shenzhen Bay Bridge, so it's a trial scheme. On that bridge, there are about 4 kilometers of expressway. The speed limit is 100 kilometers per hour. We're going to do a trial scheme there, and believe it's a good spot to do so, because then we'll see for a longer distance how effective the average speed camera system works. So it's good to try it out on a stretch of road with the same speed limit instead of different speed limits. And also the road is closed at night, so it will facilitate installation. And we find this to be a good spot for the trial scheme. If the scheme works, then we will assess the feasibility of introducing average speed camera system in other locations in Hong Kong. If you support our funding application to the Finance Committee, then we propose a 12-month trial scheme starting from the end of next year. And we're happy to hear members' views. Thank you. 3 members have raised their hands: Hon Tang Ka-piu, Ronnie Tong, Pun Shou Ping. Anyone else? 4 members then. 3 minutes each. Mr. Wong Kok Heng. Mr. Chairman, this paper shows that there's been substantial increase in prosecution on basis of speeding. 2010, 216,000, 2012, 266,000. So over 3 years, on average, it's 223,000 cases of prosecution. That shows that the speed enforcement or speed detection measure is problematic. It's because you just put a lot of casings without the same number of digital cameras. For example, paragraph 3, it says that there are 135 housings, but how many cameras are there? It didn't say. But before, there were just 20 digital cameras for about 120 casings. That means 100 of the casings have no cameras in it. And so drivers encouraged to will be able to slow down when they see the casing and pick up speed again. So it shows that the current system doesn't not work. But now you are putting the cart before the horse by adopting the average speed camera system. That is, you put a camera at the entry point and one at the exit point out of stretch of road, and then you measure the average speed. But what about the smart drivers? They may slow down for that stretch, and for the other stretches of road they will still pick up speed again, so there is no point. Now for the Shenzhen Bay Bridge, 4 kilometers long, at the entry point exit point you put the cameras there, and for a smart driver then he will slow down at the entry point exit point, and then for other stretches of road he will still speed. So what's the point? I think if you want to address the problem at a source, you don't just put empty casings. If you have 135 casings, you should install 135 digital cameras. Only then could you effectively prevent drivers from speeding, and drivers won't be encouraged to try their luck. So I hope you respond. Thank you. Under Secretary? Let me respond briefly, and now invite police to say something more. Now, about the changes in figures, that has more to do with enforcement action. I'll ask the police colleague to explain why there are changes in the number of prosecutions. For the current approach, here we're talking about 2 separate issues. One is that now speed enforcement is point specific, and here we're proposing speed detection over a longer distance, so they serve different purposes. Well, I have limited time, Mr. Chairman. I hope the Undersecretary will give a targeted response. Now, what about the smart drivers? If they slow down at the entry and exit points, and then on other stretches drivers still pick up speed, then what do you do? How do you prevent that? Just focus on that point. Perhaps I could invite Mr. Varus to answer.
Speed camera system works over average speed. When a car passes the first camera, the registered number is recorded, passes to the second camera, and a calculation of speed over time is taken to calculate the average speeds of the vehicle over the distance. Overseas experience is that vehicles don't speed up and slow down. There's no purpose for that. Why would a vehicle drive into the area slow and drive out fast? There's no purpose to that. Overseas experience is that doesn't happen. Regarding the prosecution for speeding, which have fluctuated since 2010, in 2011 the speed enforcement fixed camera systems were upgraded to the current digital systems. So in 2011 they're undergoing reprovision, therefore the figures dropped. In 2012 and 13 they've come online, the new cameras, and therefore the figures for speeding have increased. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
鄧家彪議員，主席，我認為政府冇回。
Mr. Wong Kwang, I don't think the administration has asked the question. I will not support this scheme. Mr. Tang Ka-piu, I wonder if the administration has done some calculation. What is the cost involved if you have 135 digital cameras? You know, the installation cost as well as the operational cost. And what if you say just fill half of the housings with digital cameras? What would be the effectiveness? Have you done any assessment? Maybe if you put more cameras, there'll be fewer cases of fine because people know and they won't speed. So why is there any reason why you don't fill all housings with digital camera? Actually, the Audit Commission has criticized you for just introducing so few cameras, and then the Audit Commission suggested every speed camera system, but so now you're finally introducing one system. But why do you pick Sunjun Bay Bridge? I understand there are many cars on this road by professional drivers. Many. Are you saying that these professional drivers, lorry drivers, are speeding a lot? Undersecretary? Now, this average speed camera system is just a trial scheme. And if the trial works, then we will install the system in other road stretch as well. Now, we're picking this road for a trial scheme because it has several merits. First of all, it is a relatively long stretch of road, 4 kilometers. And speed limits could be changed, so we could try different speeds and see how it works for the different speeds. And also, there are gantries across the bridge, so it's easier to install the cameras. And at night, the road is closed, so it won't affect traffic when we install the system. This is a trial scheme, and after a year, if we think the scheme works well, and then we're able to check out prosecution, then we will install the system on other roads. What I mean by if it's effective, that means you catch more people speeding or no one speeds, what do we consider to be a successful scheme? Now, we are able to, we will consider how effective it is in catching the speeding, and there's also the question of prosecution, because whether there could be successful prosecutions in court, we have to look at that. That means it's the quality of the evidence. My first question is about the cost of installing 135 digital cameras in all housings. What would be the estimated effect, and what are the costs? Now, what is the effective way to install speed detection devices? There is an estimate. It may not be necessary to install cameras in all housings. It may not necessarily be the most effective to do that. I think it's important that we discourage drivers from trying their luck as a matter of striking a balance. I think that's more important.
Well, the agenda item today focuses on the pilot scheme. So we try to understand the details of the scheme, and please, members, ask questions in that direction, please. Mr. Ronnie Tong next. Chairman, I haven't decided whether to support the scheme or not, but I have a question. Now, for this average speed camera trial scheme, does it apply only to a section of the road with the same speed limit? If a road has different or varied speed limits, then that's not fair to the drivers, because they would not be able to understand the different speed limits, and that's unfair to professional drivers. So would that the scheme or the system be applicable only to a stretch of road with the same speed? And then also that should also cover a certain distance of road. Also, if it is going to be installed only on the bridge, does it serve good purpose? I understand that the patronage of the bridge is not that high for the moment. Would you consider trying out the scheme in roads with higher patronage? Because one of your objectives is to see whether the court will admit the information as evident. Now, people may hear that the trial scheme is being tested on the bridge, and then people will not speed in that section. Then that would not help in assessing the effect of the trial scheme. Now, I will explain the effectiveness of the scheme later on. Now, when we talk about variable speed limit, we're not saying that this road has different speed limits. What we meant is that under different weather conditions, the speed limits will be changed. And for the whole section, the same speed limit will apply. So perhaps I will defer to a colleague from the Transport Department to tackle that point. Mr. Lang? Well, the Undersecretary has been very clear at the Shenzhen Bay Bridge. What we meant by variable speed limit is that at certain time, then the speed limit may be changed. Say in certain conditions, say when the bridge is being hit by a strong wind, the speed limit of the bridge may be changed, say from 100 kilometers to 80 kilometers, or further still 50 kilometers per hour. So that if a change is going to be implemented, then that it applies to the whole section of the bridge. So I don't think you get my question. Say in the Tolo Harbour Highway, and there are certain sections of the road with speed limits at 50 kilometers, 80 kilometers, or 100 kilometers. So how are you going to set up all these gantries along, say, the Tolo Harbour Highway? And so does it mean that your scheme is applicable only to a section of the road which has the same speed limit? Well, this is exactly what I'm going to explain. Now, if we're going to expand the scheme to other places, we would install the ASCS, and then we would only put it at the sections of the road with the same speed limit. Now, is the Shenzhen Bay Bridge a good choice? Yes, we have examined various road sections. I must emphasize that this is just a trial scheme, and around 10,000 vehicles of different types pass through the bridge every day. And then there is various speed limit on the bridge, and there are not many similar types of roads in Hong Kong. So the Transport Department has looked at all sides, and then we think that this is a good spot for the trial scheme. Now, if the scheme proves successful, we would expand it to other sections of the road where more enforcement action is needed. Now, if there is no prosecution, ultimately, would you consider the trial scheme successful or not? Now there, as I said, there are on average 10,000 vehicles using that road every day. So I'm confident that we can get some good results from the trial scheme. Well, the test is not so much just on the number of prosecutions, but rather whether the scheme or the trial system is feasible. Now, if drivers would slow down when they look at the scheme, that they spot the camera, then at the gantry, then there will not be any prosecution. Mr. Pan Xiaoping next. Now, I want to follow up on this. If drivers know that there is this camera installed there, then drivers will not speed. Now, for this bridge, one side is Hong Kong, the other is Shenzhen, and so the enforcement authority rests with the Hong Kong authorities. Well, for this scheme, do we need a very long stretch of very straight road to use this the system? Have the Transport Department made any assessment on that, Mr. Leung? If the trial scheme proves successful and we can expand it to other road sections, the road sections do not necessarily have to be straight, and all we need is a relative long stretch of road, say several kilometers, and then at the entry and exit points, there are appropriate size for us to put up the cameras, then that will do. Because the system works like this. Now the car enters the entry point, and then a record will be made of the time. And then when the car exits the exit point, then that would another record will be made of the time of exit, and then we will make a calculation of the speed during that of the vehicle during that stretch of road, because the speed limit of that section is predetermined, and we would, by doing so, be able to calculate the average speed of the vehicles. Now, if the vehicle exceeds the speed limit, it means that he has already speeded, and so whether the road has bends or not doesn't matter, as long as we've got these two sites can be set up at the entry and exit points, the camera set up, then that would be good enough. Now, there are more than 100,000 prosecutions on speeding every year. Some of the camera housings do not have any cameras. Now, say if we install cameras in all the housings, what will be the cost? Well, the Transport Department actually has made a calculation on the cost. Mr. Leung, please explain. Now, for the ASCS, the merit is that we will be able to continuously monitor the speed of the vehicles along the whole stretch of the road, and compared to the traditional speeding camera system, then only the photograph of one spot will be taken, and then the monitoring distance will only be around 200 meters. Now, say if the stretch of road is 4 kilometers long, and then we have to achieve the effect of the ASCS using the traditional camera system, we have to install one camera every 200 meters along that stretch of road. And by comparison, we have to use the 20 traditional camera systems. And the cost would be around $22 million. Now, for ASCS system, we only need to install the camera at the entry and exit point, and the cost is around $9 million. So you can see that the cost is really much lower for the ASCS. Mr. James Toh, several points. This AS system is really to deter people from speeding along the stretch of the road being monitored. Well, how serious the problem without having such a system or scheme or system monitored, and how prevalent are the accident rates, and how serious are the accidents without such a camera system? Say if the problem is not that serious and you are proposing this average speed camera system, this means that all motorists have to be doubly careful in driving. And do we as a society want to go down that route? Say, for example, in some sections of the road where the cameras are installed, and then people speed up again after they pass the cameras. Have you put in cameras after the people have speeded up? The people are driving very fast. Have you monitored the situation after people have passed the speeding cameras? Because in paragraph 4, you say that some drivers may accelerate after slowing down. Have you monitored how serious is the problem of their accelerating the speed? Now, Mr. Ronnie Tang's concern is not a great concern to me. Now, if people speed, and if there is a speed limit of 50 kilometers and the drivers drive at 70 kilometers per hour, of course the drivers have speeded and have violated the law. Now, in the paper, you also talked about the automatic number plates recognition system. And then we have been talking about using this system for recognizing law violators. I think we have to be very careful because there are all kinds of privacy concerns with this system. And we can talk about that later. Now, the scheme proposed deploys the ANPR. We have to be very careful. Have you made an assessment of how accurate you are in using that system in recognizing the car plates? Under Secretary, please. Well, 2 points. First, and then I'll ask the police colleagues to supplement. First, for this new system is complementary to the traditional system. It's not replacing the traditional system altogether. This system tackles or targets the long stretches of road and which can detect speeding in a more effective manner. That's the first point. And secondly, about their experience and statistics as far as the enforcement is concerned, I would ask the police colleagues to supplement. Now, as I said, we would be installing it at a stretch of road with the same speed limit. Mr. Varalis.
The speeding enforcement at the location on the Shenzhen Bay Bridge. In 2010, there were 10 cases. In 2011, 29.
主席，我唔係問呢個數字，我係問即係話你經過一個點，佢唔超速。
Well, what I'm asking is that after the vehicles have passed a certain camera and then the vehicles speed up, have you assessed whether how serious is the situation? Mr. Varalis.
Study into that particular habit, but it's a well-known fact that people, when driving the highways, can see the fixed locations for the cameras and the camera housings, and some drivers will drive accordingly. That's common knowledge, and we see that, we witness that on the road. We haven't conducted a study into that, Mr. Chairman.
可能就係即係而家我哋講緊呢個係一。
Well, we're talking about a trial scheme. You have to collect statistics to convince us that this problem is a serious one, and then hence the need for the trial scheme or the new system. Say, If the people, after passing through a certain camera, have speeded and exceeded the limit by 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers, then that shows that the problem is serious, and we don't need to go all the way to have this new system to tackle such a non-serious problem. You haven't been undertaking a study in that respect. I don't know why.
Mr. Toh is suggesting we do a thorough study first before we see what there's at least some figures. You have no figures. You say common knowledge only. That's all. Goodness. Now we're saying that for this system is to complement the existing system. When colleagues take enforcement action, police or transport department colleagues, in their day-to-day work, they have observed this phenomenon. We say we have this system. It's not to replace all the other systems. No. We're saying that with this system, we see it probably could serve some deterrent effect. And from overseas experience, this system works. And in terms of resources, we're able to save resources too with this system. So that's why we believe we could do such a trial scheme. No other members have asked to speak. That's why I allow Mr. James Toh a bit more time. Mr. Ronnie Tong, can I ask the administration to provide figures on from overseas experience for us? Perhaps I could invite our transport department colleagues to explain the experience they have referred to overseas. They could share that information with you. Mr. Lang? Before we considered, decided on this trial scheme, we did some information research. Now, this system is actually being increasingly used in other countries. The UK, for instance, in 2011, there was comparison of average speed camera system before and after the installation, number of road deaths or serious injuries. There's a drop of 51.6%. Number of deaths or serious injuries, there's an average decrease of 41.8%. So from road safety consideration, it shows that the system has been effective in promoting road safety. So there are figures to support that. Can you give us something in writing? I'm sure you can, right? Is it just the UK? What about other countries? What about other countries? Give us the data for a few other countries, perhaps. Yes, we could do that. Mr. James Toh, maybe you give these figures. I want figures from overseas, of course. But I think for Hong Kong, are there any road sections, let's say those with high speed, with speed limit of 80 or 100 kilometers per hour? Say for the whole stretch, with speed limit of 100 kilometers per hour, you have to tell us how many cameras and what's the distance between these cameras. If, say, one person could go past one camera without speeding and go past another camera without speeding, and then all of a sudden he just speeds up and then he slows down again to the next, you might say it's even more dangerous. Yes, in theory, yes. But you have to work out the calculations, even in theory. How would you install cameras like that? Maybe for the more important roads, especially roads with more accidents, you would put more cameras, because that's the consideration you take, right? Let's say it's just, for pleasure, all of a sudden someone drives at 85 instead of the speed limit 80 or 90, it's just speeding by 5-10 kilometers. Why bother with so much hassle? And you have a team with handheld guns, so the police could convince us. Above paragraph 4 is not common knowledge, it's serious. That is, you have tried it in some road sections, instead of 80, people go up to 150 kilometers, and then all of a sudden they break to 80 just to test the braking system. Now, have you got such cases? If so, then you should have picked up such cases. You should have prosecuted. Well, you could do it. Why didn't you? I don't get it at all. And then you say now we want to do something else. I don't think you have enough justifications. You can't say that because there's something marginal. Possibly it's marginal, or maybe it's serious. We don't know. You have to convince us with facts. You can't say that, oh, others do this. But maybe for others along the entire road is so lengthy. One camera, then the next camera may be 10 kilometers later. But in Hong Kong, it's different. You put cameras very close to each other. Chairman, for effective enforcement of speed limit, we want the driver to comply with speed limit throughout. If there is any device that could detect that, it should have been introduced. I think in terms of technological advancement, first there were devices on fixed points, and then there are devices to decide on speed. So we will consider the latest technology in doing our enforcement. So do you have a device that you could send out signals to the transport department? Put a black box there or something. You could check it regularly. Check how people do. Maybe after a month you check the black box. You could issue 5 tickets if you want. You have to convince us that it's so serious that we must do it. It's the government's duty to do so. Mr. Chung Kok-pen, thank you. The trial scheme at Shenzhen Bay Bridge, can you tell us roughly, starting from which is the entry point? There's a plan. Sorry, my apology, because I was at the complaints division. I'm late now. I don't know. It's Appendix A. And it's in the annex. You can tell it's almost the entire section of the Shenzhen Bridge. I only drove past the bridge yesterday. It was the entire stretch from the one end of the bridge to the other. That means you have to slow down before you even get to that point as you approach the clearance facilities. Can you really test it? Really, I have a question. Maybe it should be somewhere in the middle, or maybe before the bridge, starting from the section with a speed limit of 80 kilometers per hour. Only then can you test the whole stretch. Mr. Leung, Transport Department. Mr. Leung, how did you pick the stretch for the trial scheme? Now, we've explained the choice of this bridge. Now, there is need to install a camera on every targeting every lane. So if there are already gantries on the bridge, then we can make use of the gantries for the installation of the cameras. We've picked the Shenzhen Bay Bridge. On the bridge, not far from one point leading up to the bridge, there's already a gantry, and coming down the bridge there's also a pair of gantries. That's why we have picked that section of the bridge for the trial scheme. And with this installation, we could cover the entire Shenzhen Bay Bridge. As a motorist drive up the bridge, will be able to test and will be able to detect whether there's any speeding. So you're saying, because towards the end of the bridge, people have to slow down because they are starting to come down the slope and pass the cross-boundary facilities. You mean coming back to Hong Kong in that direction? Yes, it's the same. What Mr. Chung suggested would happen either way. That is, towards the end of the bridge, people will slow down already. In that case, would it affect the results? I have another question. Let's say the trial scheme proves to be effective, then would you then be installing the camera systems in other parts of Hong Kong? Yes, that's our thinking. Of course, we have to pick suitable locations for installation, and that would locations that would also benefit enforcement. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask for some information? It's 11 million for the trial scheme. It seems that you're going to replace the system, replace the conventional system with this one, or at least they will be complementary. And everybody knows now you're going to set up such a system along the Shenzhen Bay Bridge. So could the trial effect achieve the desired result then? That's the first question. Second point, for this Shenzhen Bay Bridge, is it already your observation from your day-to-day work there is a lot of speeding and that you cannot deal with it with conventional tools? That's why you're asking for a new device in the hope of curbing speeding on that bridge. Is that the case? My third question, can you do a comparison on cost effectiveness? Say for the same section of bridge, if you use mobile devices or you install speed cameras, how would they compare? Mr. Wu, you've asked 3 questions. If all been asked by other members, actually. Oh, my apology. Under Secretary, please be very concise then. Yes, we understand the members' concerns. We are happy to explain again. Now, this system is not to replace the existing system. It will just be complementary to the existing system. And it's more cost-effective compared to the conventional system. That's why we believe it's worth introducing the system. So we have to start with a trial, and we have to pick the right spot for a trial. That is, there is enough traffic, and also is the stretch that will allow us to do experiment with different speed limits, and Shenzhen Bay Bridge has this condition. For other roads in Hong Kong, it may not be possible to vary the speed limits over a long stretch of road, but Shenzhen Bay Bridge we can do it. It's not because there is a particular problem of speeding here. That's why we're doing this trial on Shenzhen Bay Bridge. It's not the case, just that it's the right place for us to do the trial. And as I mentioned, the Shenzhen Bay Bridge is closed at night, so it will facilitate installation of the cameras. And also there are Kang trees in existence, and they will allow us to put up the cameras quickly. That's why we're picking this spot. The Transport Department has looked all over the territory. Not many places have all these conditions. That's why we picked Shenzhen Bay Bridge. Thank you. Mr. Chair, members, I think we spent quite a bit of time on this item. We still have 3 items to cover. So I will wrap up discussion on this item, okay? They will supply the information, especially analysis about Hong Kong. How far away are the cameras now? It's after all just a trial scheme, and when the department carries out trial scheme, or later on, hopefully you will give us a detailed report. Because when you actually implement the scheme in future, there's still another chance for us to discuss it further. Because you may have to go back to the Finance Committee for more funds, or you may have to consider what you need to do on the road so that you can install the camera, and what distances are we talking about, where are the high-risk areas, and perhaps for certain road sections, the speed limit is unrealistic. Maybe you could increase the speed limit to 70, but it's still 50. Or maybe some road sections you could increase the speed limit to 100, but it's still capped at 70 now. So there could be a wholesale review later on. And after you've done the trial scheme, I hope the department will do a comprehensive review, okay? Thank you. Paragraph 7, that is, it depends on our views whether this item will go to the PwC. I object. Mr. Chairman, I'm against this funding application. I have to state that clearly. Yes, I'm going to ask members in any case. Members, do you support or not support this scheme? Mr. Ronnie Tong. I'm not against it, but I can't say I support it either. I really have to go and consider it further. Because we spend $10 million in future, we bought the scheme. Wouldn't it be a waste of money? We have to see what sort of pressure it might impose on drivers. I think we have to consider that very carefully. So we need to indicate our position. I can't say I support it, really. Those in favor, hands up, please. 2. Those against? 3. Under Secretary, not all members have put up their hands, but 3 have expressed opposition. 2 said they support the scheme, so you have to consider further whether you're going to go to the Finance Committee. Otherwise, you might not get approval. Mr. Albert Chen, I didn't speak, but I object the scheme because, you know, roads are so short in Hong Kong. Our case is entirely different than that in overseas. I really doubt whether this system works for Hong Kong. I have great reservation. Maybe for some stretches it works, like the Yunlong Expressway, the Tuen Mun Road, long stretches. But anyway, let's not have a debate here. I'll end the discussion here. Under Secretary, you should go back and think about it. Members have grave reservation about the scheme, it seems. Next item, then.
The next item is reprovisioning of toll collection systems at Lantau Toll Plaza and Ma Wan Toll Plaza in Chiang Mai Control Area. I'm not going to introduce everyone one by one. Perhaps the Undersecretary, please brief us on the paper. Thank you, Chairman. Currently, the Lantau Link is the only road access to the Lantau Island. To provide convenience of drivers and to smoothen the traffic to Lantau Island, we adopt a one-way toll collection arrangement at the Lantau Link. And then for 2 traffic islands and 5 toll booths at the airport-bound carriageways of the Lantau Toll Plaza were removed in 1999. Now, with the commissioning of the Hong Kong-Macau Bridge and the Tuen Mun Chat Lok Kok Link in 2013 and 2016, then Lantau Link will no longer be the only road access to the Lantau Island. Under the existing one-way toll arrangement, we will be having the scenario of imposing a levy on those who just who use it for once or to charge them double. And we know that because of this, we have to change it to a two-way toll collection arrangement before 2016. So the toll charge will be levied on either way for using the Lantau Link. Now, because of the two-way toll arrangement, we will install the auto toll system and reinstate the removed traffic islands, traffic signs, and road markings. And we provide the 2 toll booths at the airport-bound carriageways. Also, the toll booths at the Lantau Toll Plaza and Ma Wan Toll Plaza and the toll collection systems have to be replaced because of the dilapidated conditions and will not be cost effective to maintain them. So hence the need for replacement. Also, the toll booths have been in operation for a number of years and they're in dilapidated condition. So we propose to replace them and at the same time with the TCS replacement. And the cost is $81.3 million. And if we get members' support, we will make funding application to the FC. The time taken for tendering and system design and so on needs time. So we propose to embark on the project as soon as possible so that everything will be installed in time. If we get the FC's funding approval, we would start the work in July 2013. And we propose to complete the works by mid-2016. And I'm happy to hear members' views on the project. Questions from members? Please raise your hands. Albert Chen, Tang Ka-piu, Pan Xiaoping. Any other member? If not, 4 minutes each, please. Mr. Albert Chen. I won't object to the proposal in principle. And it takes 3 years. That's quite staggering. Because it seems a simple project to me. Why so long? It casts doubts on the effectiveness of the administration. Well, Chairman, I have also said this for over a number of years. The Qingmao Bridge. At the Qingmao Bridge, taxis and private cars cannot unload passengers, and that provides inconvenience, and that is very inconvenient to vehicles. I declare interest. I drive through the Qingmao Bridge a lot of time, and then we are not allowed to unload our passengers. And also, the same goes to the cross-harbour tunnel. And actually, even if it is illegal, then a lot of taxis and PLBs are unloading their passengers at the entrances or exits of the cross-harbour tunnels. Although it is legal, people have been doing it for many years because there is a real need. Now, about the Tuen Mun bus interchange, and the government has acceded to our request to provide for loading and unloading, passenger unloading and loading bay at the interchange. I think the same should apply to the toll plaza, because that would provide a lot of inconvenience to the drivers and the passengers. So can the government consider this when you are replacing the toll collection systems? Would you consider also installing the passenger loading and unloading bays for taxis and private cars? Can you consider that? They may not park there, but they are allowed to drop off passengers there. Yes, Mr. Chan's view, I've heard them at other occasions, and we are considering that. But that has not much to do with the replacement of the toll collection system. Well, I think it has to do with the positioning of the toll collection system, because if the system can be designed in a way which can allow for these loading and unloading areas, and that would be good. Chairman, we would be considering that in another study. Mr. Albert Chan's points. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Chan for supporting the project. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Tang Ka-piu, I declare that I'm an island district councillor. Unless the administration undertakes to review the toll charges, the 60 FTU members will not support the proposal. Well, we have had a motion debate earlier on at Electrical, and we talked about the development of Lantau Island. We think the toll charges should be done away with altogether for the Lantau link. Now, the Choice magazine recently carried an article about people's purchase of air conditioners, and it found in the survey that people have been charged a higher cost for installing air conditioning at their homes. And Lantau Island is considered one of the outlying district islands for surcharge. So Lantau Island is considered an outlying island, and because of that definition, people living there have a difficult time as far as daily living is concerned. Now, and for the airport, it is also difficult to hire workers, because of the high transport costs. Now, in paragraph 16 of the paper, is that the tuition costs are part of the operating cost of the Lantau link. And by the same rationale, and actually you've been charging high tolls for the last decade, and then that should also be used to cover the project costs this time. So I don't support that you maintain your existing toll charges, and then you're asking for an $81 million for the replacement scheme. Well, Undersecretary, I understand Mr. Tang's point about people's concern about the high transport costs, but I would like to highlight 2 points. The Lantau Island residents, the grassroots levels, they depend on railways and buses for traveling to other parts of Hong Kong. Bus fares. Well, we have another system to monitor that. The costs for buses for using the Lantau link make up only a very small percentage of the bus companies' operating costs. And we abide by the principle of cost recovery and the user pay principle in charging tolls on government-tolled roads. And we think that the payer should pay for the use of the roads. And in determining the toll charges, we will take into account of a basket of factors, including people's affordability. And we will also consider that these roads are projects of heavy investment, and we need to charge the road users. And also for recovering our costs in traffic control. So we don't intend to change the tolling policy for the Lantau link. Undersecretary, I don't agree with what you said. The operating costs come from the fact that you hire people to collect the charges. And what about the Stonecutters Islands Bridge? And also the Tang Ka-piu Bridge. Well, these bridges are not toll-free. Why you have to levy toll charge on the Lantau link? And for the Tuen Mun Chat Lap Kok link, I think we don't impose tolls on that road as well, because it's all for the economic good of Hong Kong. Well, let's focus on these the toll collection systems along Lantau link, and I don't want to dwell on whether to charge tolls or not. Let's talk about or focus on the toll collection system. Let's find some other opportunity to deliberate on that. Mr. Pan Xiaoping, my understanding that is the one-way toll arrangement will be changed to a two-way toll arrangement, and because of this, the toll charges have to be adjusted, because we can't charge $30, whereas in fact it should be $15. Now, also in the manpower arrangement, you have to hire more workers. And have you made an estimate on the extra number of people needed? And if more people are hired, will that also drive up the operating costs and the toll charges? Now, if Mr. Tang Ka-piu's request can be acceded to, then that would be ideal. What about the toll charges? Would you be splitting up into two halves? Now, if we are to change it to a two-way toll system, so the toll charges will be halved. Now, as for the manpower planning, I'll defer to the TD colleague to answer. Mr. Zhang? Chairman, for the one-way toll arrangement, we ask drivers when they return to Kowloon, then they would pay the toll charges. There are 3 auto toll lanes and 7 manual toll collection lanes. Now, if under the two-way toll collection system for the airbound carriage, that will be 7 manual toll lanes and 3 auto toll lanes. And on the Lantau link, we employ a total of 30 toll collectors. And we estimate or envisage that we will be employing an estimate same number of people, i.e. 30 extra people will be employed. I don't want to see that the fare or the toll charges will be increased because you are bringing in extra manpower. Well, I don't think that would be the case, because originally there was a one-way toll collection system, but then that was demolished, and then now we're going back to the old ways. Now, I don't want to talk about, I don't want to repeat myself.
I don't know when you might go to the PWSC, but I hope you will explain the paper. What the cost would be if you carry out these works, how many staff members will be increased, and if you cancel the toll arrangement, how it might benefit the economy. I think it will go straight to the Finance Committee. It won't go to the Public Works Subcommittee. Under Secretary, as I explained, on the staffing implications, and I will explain that. We'll also explain the toll policy on the bridge. But we have no intention to alter the toll policy. As for the toll level, for all toll charging roads and bridges and tunnels, the government will do a review every year in relation to the toll levels, and will consider a basket of factors. As you can see, for the Chiang Ma control area or the Lantau toll, we have maintained at the same level for many years. Okay, no other questions, so that's all for this item. Members, do you support the government referring this item to the Finance Committee? Those in favour, please, hands up. 4. Those against? 1. So, Under Secretary, you see that. Please submit it to the FC as soon as possible. Next item. Item 6. Major midterm review on the 6 major outlying island ferry routes. We'll invite the administration in. I would like to welcome Professor Anthony General Secretary for Transport and Housing and Commissioner for Transport, Mrs. Ingrid Yeung. Now I welcome other Bureau and Department colleagues too to the discussion of this item. Secretary, when you're ready, please give us an introduction. Starting from mid-2011, the administration has offered a package of special helping measures for the 6 major outlying island ferry routes for 3 years. And we have undertaken to do mid-term review to make sure that public funds are properly spent. And we have now completed the mid-term review, and we have come back to the panel to report on our findings. Now, on the basis of review findings, we propose that for the next 3-year license period from mid-2014 to mid-2017, we will still keep the special helping measures. And because of escalating operating costs, we will revise the upper limit for reimbursement. And before we go to the details of the special helping measures, I would like to first spell out the government's policy on outlying island ferry services. Now, the government's policy has always been to allow such public transport services to be run by the private sector on commercial principles. We will not usually give subsidy. But then for the outlying island ferry routes, we have to consider specific factors. First, ferry service is the only form of transportation for residents there. And then for the population in these outlying islands, there's been a drop instead of a rise. And so there's been no growth in business for the in service demand for the ferry routes. Now, we do not want to see termination of service or substantial fare increase. So the government's policy is that while we maintain the principle of allowing private operators to provide transport services on commercial principles, we also give some form of subsidy so that we can maintain the fair level, reasonable level, and to maintain the financial viability of the ferry services. In 2011, we conducted a review on outlying island ferry services. And for the 3-year license period from mid-2014 to mid-2017, we proposed special helping measures of over $100 billion. Now, because without the SHM, then fare increase would have been 20% instead of the eventual 10%. Apart from depreciation costs and staffing costs, all the other expenditure items could be brought under the subsidy scope, and this is spelled out in the Annex C to the paper. This will allow the ferry services to be operated on commercial principles at the same time with regard to the affordability of the public. And we take up an appropriate share of the responsibility in relieving pressure on fare increase. And we want to make sure that whatever special helping measures we put in place, it won't affect the operation of other transport modes. Now, I'm going to go to the midterm review. For the 6 major outlying island ferry routes, it's important that we maintain their financial viability. We do not provide the SHMs, the existing operators will suffer loss, they won't be able to stay in business. And even if we have a fresh round of tendering, the situation will not improve. That's why for the next 3 years, we believe we should maintain the SHMs. And because of the escalating operating costs, we believe we could adjust the upper limit, I must stress it's the upper limit, to $191 million. But still, it will be on a reimbursement basis. This is to make sure that operators will pay attention to operation efficiency. For the 2 operators, we have gauged their views. We understand they have the intention to apply for renewal of the license for 3 years, but the precondition is that the SHMs will continue, and then there will be suitable adjustment of the upper limit. Now, whether the 2 operators will renew the license, that is still subject to formal negotiations, but if they do renew the license, the government will make sure that they cannot just increase fare at whim. Now, for the may I also refer to the Commission of Inquiry report in relation to the vessel collision incident near Lamma Island on the 1st of October last year. As I said, we will continue to do our best to follow up on the recommendations and improve maritime safety. We understand such measures may have cost implications on the operators. We will the government will decide how we're going to take up the recommendations, and once we have a decision, we will assess the cost implications on the operators of the 6 ferry routes, and we'll consider whether there is a need for separate introduction of new helping measures. But of course, the very top priority of the government is safety. And now I and my team would be happy to answer members' questions. Mr. Tang Ka-piu, Mr. Albert Chen, Porter, anyone else, please? No? I'll draw the line here, okay? Because we still have another agenda item. 4 minutes each. Mr. Tang Ka-piu. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Island District Councillor. Now, using public money to subsidize ferry services, I welcome it. The Island District Council welcomes it. But for the subsidized items, are these items which are hard to monitor by district councillors or the public? No. We have questions. Why don't you consider subsidize the fuel costs? Because then it's easy to monitor. But do you subsidize the maintenance costs and so on? It's hard for us to tell whether they are using a subsidy properly. Maybe a subsidy exceeds the reasonable level, so they're just trying to take money from government. It's hard to monitor. And before there's this policy, we had many discussions with the ferry operators and the Transport Department frontline officers. They say the only reason for fare increase is fuel cost. In that case, why don't you just subsidize the fuel cost? Why subsidize items that's hard for us to monitor? And I hope you will also give subsidy for staff or staff training, rather. We see that on ferries, the staff are of an old age. Even for New World First Ferry, the captains are age about 55, some are age 65, and then they have 24-hour shift. They're one day on, one day off. That's scary. So you could enhance safety by giving more staffing resources. And Secretary, can you guarantee that after you pay out the $191 million, there won't be any fare increase in the next 3 years? Secretary, there are a number of questions. First, about staff training or talent training. We understand for the entire maritime trade, ferry services and other services, they all face the same problem. The Financial Secretary has announced in the budget that $100 million will be injected into a training fund for maritime and aviation talents. And we will provide assistance on staff training or talent training for this trade, and it's really not within the scope of this paper. For the special helping measures, SHM, the upper limit is $191 million. I can't give a guarantee that then there won't be any fare increase. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, if the operator proposes any fare increase, we will continue to be prudent in assessing the needs. Now, why don't we give subsidy on fuel costs or staff costs? If we do that for fuel costs, then we have to do. Then there will be read-across implications for the entire public transport policy. For public transport services, we still want operators to provide such services on prudent commercial principles. We do not have any specific subsidy policy. But for the outlying islands, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the situation is rather unique. We want subsidy to be on a reimbursement basis, and the Transport Department does check their operating accounts carefully to make sure the public funds spent properly. But then the problems would, there could be this problem. If fuel costs go up, then they will ask for fare increase. Now, I don't mind if you also subsidize the fuel costs of franchise buses, then the general public won't have to see so many fare hikes. Mr. Albert Chen, I think it's another form of transfer of interest. I never supported such SHMs. In the long run, the restructuring of ferry services and the government policy, there must be wholesale change. You know, we are talking about economic development in the islands, and islands residents have to suffer high fare. There's much pressure on them. If you know anything about the course of high-speed ferry craft and the mode of operation of ferry services, you can see that island residents could not really afford the fare of high-speed craft or high-speed services, and you are perpetuating their sufferings. Now, initially the fare was $4 something. Now it's $40 on Sundays, 8 times increase. You see how ferry services make residents suffer. So the economy has come to a standstill on the islands because of the high fare, ferry fares, unless on special occasions. You know, Mui Wo is a dead town almost. Ping Chau, very occasionally people go there. Lemon Islands may do a bit better. That's all. Though you have to consider the impact of ferry services on the way of living of residents and the economic development on the islands. I think the only way is for the government to provide the ferry service. For any private operators, they won't even talk about making money. We're talking about offering a reasonable fare. Look at the income of island residents, look at their standard of living. You know, the current fare simply doesn't work. So this scheme will just extend the sufferings of island residents, and it will still make the economy stall. And I don't agree there should be both slow services and high-speed services. It's not right. Lima Island, there's only one type of craft, but for the other islands, there are two different types of vessels. Now, I go to the islands often. I take the ferry from Wiwa to Central. I take the ferry a lot. There are two different types of ferry. You say then is a choice for the residents, higher fare or lower fare. But actually you are increasing costs on the whole. It's not cost effective to do that. So you should just keep to one type of vessel. There are some vessels that may be a little faster. You don't need the high-speed craft actually. If the journey is just 45 minutes, then there's no need to have two different types of vessels, and then it would be less expensive than the high-speed craft. I've considered this with those in the with ship builders. You know, you could have vessels that go at 20 knots, and that's enough to meet the needs of island residents. But then this issue has been going on for so many years, we see no way out, and it's the residents who suffer at the end. Mr. Portier.
Mr. Tony Chair. While the subsidy is on a cost reimbursement basis on certain items, are there any estimates on the percentage of the reimbursement on the overall costs? Or are we giving a cap on the ratio? And also there are non-fare box revenue. Is the subsidy used in specified items, or are the ferry companies at liberty to use the subsidy? And is the non-fare box revenue included in the overall sum? If it is calculated separately, how is that calculated? Thank you, Chairman. Yes, on the different items, perhaps I would defer to Mr. Tao, the PAS, to answer. Now, the special helping measures make up around 14% of their expenses. Now, of course, apart from the fare revenue, they have to rely on non-fare box revenue and other commercial revenue. Mr. Tao, please. Thank you, Chairman. $191 million. Most of them is given out on a cost reimbursement basis. Apart, the maintenance of vessels takes up the largest percentage. May I refer members to Annex F? And these lists the items under that $191 million. We have taken into consideration the actual expenses in the 2011-12 operating year. And then we also make projections for the amount up till 2014. And then we also take heed of the inflation rate, 3.5% on a long-term basis. So we also factored that in. And then we come up with this latest figure for the 3 years starting 2014. The vessel maintenance cost is most important in the helping measures. We would take reference of the maintenance costs in the past few years, and we also take into account of the maintenance timetable as set up by the Marine Department. And so with all these, we come up with this amount. Now, there is also maintenance service undertaken on a regular basis. And if ferry companies report that such a maintenance service has been undertaken, and then we will seek advice or expert advice from the Marine Department to see if these claims are valid. Now, if they make a claim, the ferry companies, we need the auditors to make a report to. Sorry, Chairman, I understand all these, but my question is, for your target, what is the basis for your calculation? Are you are you allowing them to make a 5% profit, or what? How do you come up with a ratio? Now, and also for the $191 million, has the non-fare box revenue been taken into account as well? No, we don't have a sort of a guarantee for their profit rate. Now, if we're going out for tendering, we will look at the tender submissions. But now we are suggesting that the license be extended, so we'll take another route. Now, for the financial caps, we are giving out the subsidy on a cost reimbursement basis. So we have looked at the actual expenses in the past few years. Now, as for commercial revenue, non-fare box revenue, that is going to be discussed in the next agenda item. We will also look at those items, and we're taking into account of that. We will then assess their overall operating situation. Now, the sum that we are proposing is applicable to the next 3-year period, and after that, we will see whether these measures should be maintained. So, put it simply, does it mean that the non-fare bus revenue is not included in the $191 million? Yes. Well, the Annex F has been very clear on that point. Mr. Tang Ka-piu, you are in the second round. 2.5 minutes. Yes, Michael Tian, perhaps. You first. Chairman, for the past 3 years, and comparing it to the next 3 years, it's a jump from $11.5 million to $191 million. The contingency is around 10%, and there is the maintenance cost and also the revenue forgone due to provision of childcare concessions is $23.5 million. But I don't see that there are many children taking the ferry. So are you in fact changing the entire subsidy or helping measures? So does it mean that there is a change in the policy? If we continue in the present way of subsidy, then the subsidy may go on and on. And it's from $73 million to $90 million, up 30%, and is higher than the inflation rate. Now, if it is a cost, if the the subsidy is given out on a cost reimbursement basis, then that means that there is a 3 to 4% fare increase. It means that the expenditure actually on the ferry services is quite disproportionate. Now, after 2016, what is going to happen? And have you taken a long-term view of things? Now, if the maintenance cost continues to rise, would it not be better to replace the vessels altogether? Well, the next item is going to tackle that, but that's for so much. That other item is really for the non-fare box revenue. Okay, Secretary. All these special helping measures are sort of based on a cost reimbursement basis as outlined in Annex F, and they can't make claims arbitrarily. Well, I'll defer to the colleagues to explain on that point. Now, for the provision in relation to childcare fare concessions, then I will talk about that later on. Now, contingency. is a 20% of a provision. That would also be allowing us flexibility. Within this licensing period, for prudence sake, for every item we have a financial cap. Say, for the revenue forgone due to elderly and child fare concessions, there is a financial cap. Now, so far, we have vetted their claims, and actually for many of the items, their expenses cannot be reimbursed 100% because we've got this financial cap. So we will be dispersing the subsidy based on the actual cost. And so that's why in the next 3 years, we have factored in the inflation rate for the sum to be dispersed. And that would do well. And then members would be questioning on why there is such a high rise in maintenance costs. Actually, we've been monitoring the maintenance cost closely. For regular maintenance items, we would ask the Marine Department to vet those maintenance items before we disperse the subsidy. Now, for irregular maintenance services, for every maintenance service, we will seek the advice of the Marine Department. And because the sums involved may be very large, and they have to submit the auditor's report as well, together with their claims. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. These are special helping measures which are based on existing ones. The G papers are silent on the additional revenue to be generated out of the commercial facilities to be added. Now, through our special helping measures and through the additional revenue generated out of commercial facilities, what kind of financial situation will the ferry companies be in? Can this Undersecretary talk about that? On Mr. Albert Chan's point, I agree with the observation that there are more different types of vessels, then that would create difficulties for operations. Can you respond on that point, Administration? Secretary, first point about revenue from commercial operations, and actually the next agenda item we talk about the addition of 1.5 floors on the number 4 to 6 piers, central piers, and then the works actually will be completed in 2018. And that will not be benefiting the 2014 to 16 license period. Now, the government's ferry policy is this: for outlying islands which have ferry services as their only means of transport, getting to outside, and we would have to maintain those services one way or another. Now, if we think that special helping measures can assist them, then that would be good. And then, if there are commercial operators who can operate the services on commercial principles and can come up with fares which are affordable by the public, then that would be the best scenario. But if there are no operators on the existing market which are willing to operate services, then the government has to think of other ways to resolve the problem. Now, if there are no operators who are willing to provide the services, then of course the administration has to step in. Now, if different types of vessels, if there are not different types of vessels, then would help reduce cost. Okay, I will defer to Transport Department's colleagues to tackle that question. Mr. Chung. And there is a mix of vessels operated by some ferry companies, because that kind of mix has to be maintained, because some islands residents want to have different types of services, and we know that on holidays we might need vessels which have a larger capacity to serve the public. Now, the vessels which have higher capacity are the three-story vessels, and these vessels have been in use for a long time. And if we arbitrarily switch to just one type of vessels being provided, then that will involve heavy investment. So we have to be very careful on that, and we have to consider whether ferry companies can shoulder that such a large or heavy investment.
Two members have asked to speak for the second time. I can only allow 2 minutes. Mr. Tang Ka-piu, short questions, short answers then. Secretary, Commissioner, will you go back to the District Council to listen to the views again? No, I don't suppose, right? Mr. Chairman, on enhancing the SHWM, we would like to have the support of this panel, and then we will go to the Finance Committee for funding. But of course, in the long run, we still to negotiate with the operators about the renewal, and if they have any comments on the fare structure and so on, we'll have to consider that separately. No, I'm just trying to be helpful in leveling this criticism. It's true, last time when you went to the District Council, you consulted it. That paper was 4 pages. This paper, 11 pages, and does not include a background brief prepared by the Secretariat. So to LegCo, you produce a paper 11 pages long, and there are figures, there are concepts. And District Council, do you think the District Councillors are illiterate? Well, unless within a month you are able to collect so much more information, but you weren't able to do so when you went to the District Council. I think you're not respecting the District Council. You take District Council as a local partner. Please respect District Councillors and give them a chance to consider all information. 4 pages versus 11 pages, that's a huge difference. And for the District Council paper, there were no figures given. But the Islands District Council should have the strong first-hand experience. Mr. Tang, I hope you don't think that we don't respect the District Council. Anything from the Transport Department about the consultation with the District Council? So we've always have great respect for the views of District Councillors on the operation of ferry services. We published a paper to consult the District Council. We heard their views. It's like last time when we reviewed the ferry services policy. As we now implement a new policy, we will certainly go back to the District Council to report to them the details. But we must first have the support of this panel and the Finance Committee before we could actually go back to the District Council to report the latest situation to them. Mr. Michael Tian, I don't follow the Commissioner. Say just about the child fare concession. On a reimbursement basis, 3 years should be just 10 million, not 23 million. But you say the reimbursements are actually $10 million, just that you cap it. There could be a lot more. Are you saying that now it's $23.5 million compared to 10 million before? It's because in the past you didn't reimburse them fully for the concession. Now you are. That's why. No, whatever we didn't give to them before, we wouldn't go back on it. But this estimate is based on their first year of operation. It's based on the actual expenditure. So whether they reimbursed or not, that is the actual expenditure. You mean the first year for actual expenditure, how much is that? I do not have the figure with me for child fare concessions. Because if in the past 3 years it's just $10 million each year, and then, so you're saying that every year the actual expenditure has been around $8 million. So is there really such a huge discrepancy? I don't know what's going on. I can't tell from here. Perhaps I could give you the information after the meeting. Another point. For this subsidy, 60% spent on maintenance. And the maintenance costs far outstrip inflation. In the long run, it's not sustainable. Secretary, is it because there are problems with the old vessels? They won't invest in new vessels, so they keep using the old vessels. Of course, when things get older, the maintenance costs go up. So, what are you going to do about this subsidy? Have you ever considered updating the entire fleet in one go? And maybe that could keep maintenance costs at a very low level. Should you not do a review? Thank you, Mr. Tan, for your views. I think we'll look at that. Vessel maintenance costs, it's true, it's going up. But is it because there are many old vessels and the operators are unwilling to invest in replacing them? Now, I've been talking to colleagues recently. Now, the current model is that every 3 years the license will be renewed. Maybe that's the reason why the operators are not willing to make long-term investment. Well, that's one area of that we could review. Yes, please, I think you should review that. Last, Dr. Kokaki, 2 minutes. Of course, not possible for us not to grant the subsidy because then the operators can't survive. But then, this is endless pit, and the maintenance costs are expensive too. So, Secretary, have you considered this? Some have suggested perhaps the government should build some vessels and then ask an operator to run the service, because then you could procure greener vessels with lower maintenance costs. I'm sure there will be enough commercial operators willing to provide the service. And then these vessels could use clean fuel and so on. Have you considered that option? Secretary, as I reply to Mr. Wuchi, why I try to explain this. The policy on outlying island ferry service is that we must maintain the service because this is the only form of public transportation. If on the market there are no operators interested in providing the service, then we have to make some arrangement. But now, at least within the 3-year license period, with some special helping measures, we could strike a balance. On the one hand, there is a system. On the other, there are operators willing to provide a service, and then also the fare is generally affordable. So we have to consider all the balance all these factors. And if we couldn't achieve the right balance, then we will have to consider alternative approaches. Because the costs are high. I don't think anyone dares to invest in it. It's a vicious circle. It's still just the same operators all over. If you have a new approach, I'm sure there are other operators who might be willing to enter the market if the threshold is lower. Secretary, I think you ought to do a study, because many in the community have suggested something similar. That is, the government buys the vessels and hand over the vessels to an operator to provide the service. But of course, we don't know what the cost would be, how much the government has to pay out. It's hard to do a comparison if we have only the concept. I think in the long run, the government has to respond to such suggestions in the community. If you don't do any study, then you'll be under increasing pressure possibly. And on the part of the operators, I'm sure they welcome vessels being provided by the government, and then they will just run the service. And they will work out how much they can earn from the operation. And of course, what would be the cost be to the taxpayers? There is not any calculation. I think at an appropriate juncture is worth doing this study. Mr. Chairman, let me say a few more words. 3 years ago, in 2010, we did some assessment on the cost. The assessment then was, if the government were to procure the vessels for all the 6 major routes, the capital cost would be $1.7 billion. It's just about procuring the fleet. But what about maintenance and so on? That will cost something too. So the recurrent cost, whatever model we go for, will have to be reflected either in the fare or in the subsidy. So as we consider such issues further, of course, at one point we have to compare the different models, what the cost is to the public purse and how we should pursue it and so on. Last, Mr. Chen Hangpeng, we still have another item. 2 minutes, please. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Island district councillors and Island District Council have given a lot of views to the Bureau on the fuel cost, on the stabilization fund and so on. But the government believes the subsidy could be a huge sum, or it might cost a lot to buy a fleet. But let's not forget, in terms of land transport, we build roads, we build bridges, and that's a form of subsidy too. For marine traffic, sea traffic, there's no need to build roads or bridges. You only need to build a pier. So if you consider it in that light, you are putting very few resources on the islands. And even if you have to pay for a fleet, I think it's worth it, because there is no other choice, as you mentioned. There's no other form of public transport. So, as the chairman suggested, you should do an in-depth study. In the past few years, we have made a number of proposals. One is to buy a fleet and let someone operate it. The other is whether you could review the tenure of the license. Should it be 3 years? And third, whether you should consider a fare stabilization fund. Now you subsidize the maintenance. Even by doing so, they will increase fare. And if you increase fare, of course, it will be an additional burden to the public. And the island residents continue to complain, so I hope you will consider our suggestions very carefully. I've heard that. Thank you. Members, do you support the administration referring this item to the Finance Committee? Those in favour, hands up, please. 6 members. Those against, hands up, please. No objection. Fine. Secretary, thank you. Let's move on to the next item. Funding application for the construction of additional floors on Central Piers numbers 4 to 6. Can we invite the relevant colleagues from Government Department and Bureau to come in, please? I would like to welcome Mr. Yao Xing Mo, Under Secretary, and his team. Members, after discussion of this item, it will actually go to the Public Works Subcommittee. So I just want to say this to you, members. The panel, the Public Works Subcommittee and the Finance Committee, there is division of work among these 3 committees. So if you've got answers to your questions today, there's no need to repeat your questions at the PWSC unless your questions cannot be answered today properly. Then you may ask again at the PWSC, and I hope the administration will note that too. In terms of policy and the project itself, perhaps you could give a detailed reply here at the PWSC. Thank you. The Secretary, please. Yes, at the other item just now, the Secretary mentioned that in the next 3-year license period, for the 6 major outlying island route ferry operators, there will continue to be special helping measures. Now, the Transport Panel always supports the idea of ferry operators trying to create new sources of revenue, especially to increase their non-fare box revenue. That's why all along members supported additional construction on the central piers number 4 to 6, so the operators could have additional non-fare box revenue support to ferry services. Now, we're proposing adding additional floors on these 3 piers for the purpose of retail, entertainment, and catering purposes. It will help the operators with such a non-fare revenue. Now, where we have conducted the study, helped with the study, we have see how we should position the additional floors, and if there is increase in rental income, we also see how this might help the operators in running the ferry services. Apart from helping the operators, actually the additional floor project is part of the urban design study for beautifying the new central harbour front. It will provide more space for people who may not want to take the ferry, but then they could enjoy the additional space provided by the additional floors. That's part of the urban design study recommendation. Now, for this project, in money of the day prices, it will be $609.7 billion. And on the 11th of June, we propose to submit this item to the Public Works Committee for consideration. And then, if we receive funding approval from the Finance Committee in July, we will start the works at the end of the year. Between 2015 and 2018, the works will be completed in phases. Allow me a bit of time so that I can invite colleagues from the Civil Engineering Development Department to brief you on the design.
Mr. Mack, please. Central Piers number 4, 5, 6. Are in number 1 plot of urban design study for the new central harbour front. It has a very good sea view and is next to the IFC and the commercial district in Central. Under planning, there will be a podium connecting the piers to the central commercial district. Now, from the diagram shows the podium connecting directly to the piers and connecting to the existing flyovers networks. Now, on this podium, sorry? Can you be brief and faster, because a lot of members would like to raise questions. Okay, so that's a view from the Kowloon side. And that is the podium together with the piers. And that is the look of the piers from a close distance. And we adopt a green design with transparent structure. With a lined design, is like flowing water, and at night time it still looks very beautiful. And accessibility of the piers, there are 3 lifts connecting different floors, and within the complex there will be an escalator going up to level 4 and level 5 podium. And this is a simulated picture of the pier. You can tell the accessibility from this diagram. Wow, so much for my presentation. And the Secretary, do you have anything to add? No? All right. 8 members would like to speak. Any other? Because I have to draw a line. Tang Ka-piu, Christopher Chung, Wu Ji-wai, Pan Xiaoping, KK Kwok, Tony Che, Michael Ten, and 3 minutes. I'll draw a line here. Mr. Tang Ka-piu. Thank you, Chairman. I'm an Islands District Councillor. I might not represent the whole of the Island District Council, but the mainstream view is that we want the project to be implemented as soon as possible. Well, it's open to interpretation as to whether the design is good or not. But at least it can provide a further avenue for revenue for the ferry companies. Now, as far as the Islands District Council is concerned, we think that the administration has not totally incorporated our opinions. Now, if we are going to build this new additional floors on the central piers, who is going to manage the piers? And is it the same company which is operating the new facilities? Would there be any confusion in the management? Now, if the same company operates the commercial facilities and runs the ferry services at the same time, then it will not be achieve the best commercial interest. Can you tell us about the operation for these new facilities? First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Tang for supporting the concept to boost the revenue for the ferry companies. There is reconstruction of the central piers. Now, as far as the managed mode is concerned, I would defer to the TD's colleagues to elaborate. For central piers number 4, 5, 6, the long-term management model. After the funding application has been approved, we will conduct a study on that. I appreciate Mr. Tang's concern. Now, how can we ensure that the non-fare box revenue will go into cross-subsidizing the ferry services? Well, that we can understand. The Undersecretary said that because the licensing period is rather short, and the parties interested may not be willing to operate commercial facilities at the central piers. So once the construction work is completed, we will look into the matter, and we will also take reference from Island Council's views. Now, in the last item, I just want to clarify whether it is right that the two ferry companies will not get the right to operate these commercial facilities. Is that right? Yes, because the Undersecretary has mentioned that the licensing period for the two existing operators is up to the year 2017. And when the new piers are in place, it will be in 2018. So we will have to look at that. Mr. Christopher Chung, 2 questions. This is a very expensive plot of land, a very good, excellent sea view. So the business model has to be looked into again. Now, if you do a good job, then from the revenue alone, it will be able to heavily cross-subsidize ferry services. If you are handing over the management of the facilities to the ferry operators, then that won't be good enough. And if you do that, people will accuse you of transferring the benefits to the ferry companies. Of course, the ferry companies can participate in tendering for managing the facilities, but the right should not be automatically handed over to them. The tendering has to be transparent. Now, as far as the design is concerned, I think it's a rather mediocre design. And when I was an UPCO member 15 years ago, we had the plans to develop these central piers, and the design was so beautiful with the Zhang's drawings and so on. And because we're talking about the harbour front, we have to get design with very good characteristics. Now, if you are adopting a sort of a wavy design, you have to make it attractive, and you should be able to attract tourists, and people would like to take photos with the piers. Now, with the present design, are we just wasting the opportunity? Now, you can't ask for too much because we're just taking about 1.5 floors. You can do a lot actually on the rooftop. Yes, let me try to explain, Chairman. The site is a very good site. If the site is just for operating ferry services, and that is the major consideration. But we want to turn it into an open space for enjoyment by the public. So these are considerations that we have taken into account. So we have actually incorporated views from the Harbourfront Commission in coming up with a design, and the design actually has been formulated after many discussions by the Commission and the public. Now, say in the facilities, we won't be providing for office space. We will just be allowing it to be used for dining and retail facilities, and that sort of put some limits on the revenue to be generated. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, I want to follow up on Mr. Christopher Chong's point. The building has a simple purpose, and that is to provide non-fare box revenue for ferry services. That's the main goal. So if that is not considered a major factor in the design, then that would be undermining our purpose of cross-subsidizing the ferry services. So I hope that the government should re-examine the design. Now, we are investing $600 million into the building. What are our purposes? Can we generate the most revenue to cross-subsidize ferry services? I think that's the most important consideration in the overall design. Under Secretary, please. Thank you, Chairman. I understand members' concerns. Well, the prime concern is to raise the non-fare box revenue for ferry service operators. But I must emphasize too that in developing the harbour front, we have to consider other aims as well, and also the how to beautify the open space along the harbour front. That is also a major consideration. So we have to strike a balance. And for this project, earlier on, we have had some lengthy deliberations at the Town Planning Board on the design, and today what we're seeing is a result of the deliberations. So in the paper, and we assess that the revenue generated will be able to cross-subsidize the ferry services, and I think we can achieve that aim. Yes, Under Secretary, can you provide some basic data now on the revenue generated and how much money can be used or generated to cross-subsidize ferry services? Now, we anticipate that after the completion of the 3 central piers, our conservative estimation is $27 million to $69 million in revenue per year. Well, this figure is really falling far short of the helping measures. Well, can I make a simple analogy here, or comparison here? And that is actually more or less on a par with the amount under the special helping measures. Well, $190 million. Well, that is for 3 years. So perhaps you can give us a paper later on the revenue expected to be generated. I don't want to see other members raising the same question when the proposal gets to the Finance Committee. Yes, Mr. Poon Siu Peng. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I want to raise questions similar to others. Now, we are adding in 1.5 floors. Is there a possibility to add additional floors in the future? Because you are thinking of generating non-fare box revenue. And I think that the design in the old days was mistaken, and we are forced to add in 1.5 additional floors. Now, the Undersecretary talked about the anticipated revenue from the additional floors, and that's an ideal figure. But how can you ensure that there will be sufficient patronage there? And then, if not, then we'll be wasting around $700 million. Have you made adequate assessment that once the 1.5 floors are built, then we can ensure that there is a heavy patronage and meet the objective? Undersecretary, please. Well, we have made some estimates. And one is from the ferry operators or the pier operators, and they have reflected that if there is more space and that the licensing periods are longer, then they can operate dining and retail facilities, and that can help cross-subsidize ferry services. And at the same time, we have made a retail feasibility study on what types of retail trade should be put in to generate revenue. Now, from these two methods, we have made the conclusion that the commercial facilities can help generate certain revenue, and then the administration's investment into the new piers will help generate revenue for the central piers. Now, what are the target groups? The ferry passengers or other people as well? Well, both. The design of the new piers is that it will be connected to the central district, so it will make an overall area which is accessible and connectable to other parts of central. So we will be providing very good open space, and other non-ferry passengers will be patronizing the new piers there. So both types of customers. Dr. Kwakaki, we should discuss 2 points, I think. One is how to protect public interest. I think the podium is accessible by members of the public, and that's good, and we will support that. The second thing is, I am mystified. Well, if the ferry operators, they are just operating ferries, and they are not running dining facilities. I think the administration is capable of delegating real estate agents to rent out the space. It's impossible, or it's not reasonable for the ferry operators to manage the commercial facilities. Now, we just discussed that we are subsidizing the ferry services by $30 million per year. And we hope that with the building of the new piers, then that would lessen our burden in that regard. Now, you can't ask the ferry operators to run catering outlets as well. They will just end up in doing a very messy job. Now, if they are capable of doing that, then they can also put in tenders for operating the new commercial facilities. So we should not just be allocating the facilities to the ferry operators simply like that.
On the Secretary. Now, the funding we're applying for is the modification of the piers so that we could provide commercial floor space for the generation of income. And the income is to cross-subsidize the ferry services. But exactly how we will arrange the rental and so on, as the Transport Department colleague mentioned, we have to look at that further. We have to consider what is the best approach, so that the additional revenue could support or cross-subsidize ferry services. Now, for the Star Ferry, they also have non-fare box revenue. So there is still room to consider the actual arrangement, so that the rental income would serve the intended purpose. I didn't ask you for calculation. I don't think for Star Ferry they're using all of the rental income to cross-subsidize the ferry service. But Star Ferry is not the same as outlying islands, because we're spending close to $200 million to subsidize the island's ferry services. So you need to maximize your return and minimize subsidy from taxpayers' money. So I think it's not acceptable if you just give the site to the ferry operators as a matter of course. Now, we could only complete the modification in phases between 2015 and 2018. Perhaps I could invite Transport Department to explain further. Now, perhaps we can explain to you what ideas we have in mind so that such rental revenue could help to help ferry services. Now, with additional floors, additional commercial space, then hopefully we could generate more non-fare box revenue to cross-subsidize ferry services. I think this idea is in line with what members have suggested. And as the Undersecretary pointed out, we have, as the Secretary pointed out earlier, we will renew the license until 2017. But then for the modification works, the last phase will only be completed in 2018. So in the interim, we have to review the management model to see how we could maximize return. So we've heard members. Members want to make sure that there is maximum return and it's put to good use, and we'll certainly follow up on that. Mr. Porter? Making good use of land is a good idea. That's why I support additional floors. So perhaps after the meeting you could provide more figures. Because I'm concerned about the return. I'd like more information on two fronts. One, the construction cost. Perhaps the government has referred to the cost for similar projects in the past. You know, we are adding 140,000 square feet, and it costs $600 million. It's on the high side. Maybe there's special reason. Another question. Paragraph 7 of the paper, the internal rate of return. 5.8% to 14% is a huge range. The estimated rental for the first year or two, you've worked out what the possible rent income is. The range is from $27 to $69 million. So I'd like to find out more because I'm in the business, so I particularly sensitive for figures, I would say. What is the reason for the huge range? What are the considerations? Could you provide information later before you go to the Finance Committee? Undersecretary? Perhaps I could invite colleagues from the Civil Engineering Development Department to explain the construction costs. And then the Transport Department may also elaborate on the range of $27 million to $69 million. What's the reason for the huge range, for instance? Mr. Chen first then. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have referred to the information from pier works nearby in coming with this construction cost. The Star Ferry, that is pier number 7. The Star Ferry pier, we have done retrofitting and extension before we commissioned the pier. And pier number 8 is a new pier, Wan Chai pier. We're also building a new pier there. So we have referred to the cost of these other projects, and then we've come up with the estimated construction cost for this project. Now this time, apart from an addition of 1.5 floors at the 3 piers, we're also going to upgrade the existing facilities. That includes some barrier-free access and other related facilities. So the estimate is based on existing project. It's based on information of existing projects. Thank you. Mr. Porter, well, can you provide the information in writing afterwards? Mr. Michael Tian? I think the government should review how you handle such cases. I don't know if I'm going to vote in support of this project. You know, the way we work is they ask you for a sum of money. They haven't decided on the business model. But everything has to do with business model. You build something, if no one tenders, then you will have to rent it out cheap. Maybe you won't even get $20 million by then. So as you build, you have to come up with a business model. You have to tell us that there are people interested in this and there are letters of intent or whatever, because we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on various projects. After you build it, then you go and ask around if anyone's interested. What if no one is interested? I think we should stop spending money this way here in Hong Kong. Either you build it yourself and you set up your own statutory body, Ocean Park, whatever, something like that. And then this statutory body will manage all these public venues with commercial gains. So you find your own professionals to maximize income. As for operators, they should be separate category. If they're transport operators, fine. You could give them subsidy on a reimbursement basis, it's fine. But for these commercial venues, you have to manage it yourself, because I heard you give them a subsidy on the reimbursement basis, but then commercial income is for lowering the subsidy. But what incentives do the operators have to try to maximize return and come up with all sorts of gimmicks and ideas? You know, they have to bring in best tenant mix and maximize return. Why would they want to do it? Because the more they do, the less subsidy they get. There's no incentive. Because for the subsidy is on a reimbursement basis. So what incentive is there for them to maximize return from the additional floors? The more they maximize return, the less they get in subsidy. So they may scratch their head bold, but still they end up with the same amount of money. So why would they bother? Now, it's not easy to operate pier and ferry services. But actually, we have because there is little growth in the patronage for ferry services, but costs keep going up. And to allow the ferry service to stay, it is important to create revenue. No, the Undersecretary is not answering my question. What incentives do they have? Because the subsidy you give is on a reimbursement basis, right? So if they don't get in rent, you will still have to subsidize their operation in any case. So what incentives could you offer to them so that they would try to maximize return on the commercial floors, and so they get less subsidy from you? Undersecretary, for this type of model, operation model, well, I won't say we've never done it before. But then by paying more and more subsidy is something new. We have to have regard to the market development. The ferry operators have suggested this for us to try out, and also there is this demand from the community. Yes, we have to tread very carefully as we move in this direction, and we have to take it a step at a time. It's a means for the ferry operators to generate more revenue. And if they could generate more revenue, that means we don't have to pay out so much subsidy. So there would be less subsidy coming from taxpayers' money. And if they could generate more income, I would say taxpayers would then have to pay less in subsidy. That's the whole premise of this model. Mr. Chair, have you got the reply from the administration? What is the incentive for the operators? Because it doesn't matter to them, they still get the subsidy. Now, when the agreement is drawn up, maybe you have to include some sort of clause in the agreement. Is there any incentive to make them do a good job? If not, what do you do? Perhaps every time when there's a renewal of license, there has to be some form of assessment. And if they don't perform well, then you have to consider whether you renew the license. Well, I support what you said, Mr. Chairman. If they come to the PWSC for funding, they have to tell us what sort of business model there is. Because now, I can't tell. I don't see what the business model is like now. Undersecretary, before the Finance Committee, can you tell us in clear terms? Say, after 4 years, the additional floors are built, what would you do? how would you incorporate this space into the operation so that the additional floors would actually subsidize the ferry services? I don't think you're going to tender it out, right? Because then there will be a separate operator. And that operator, of course, will not put the money they've made into the ferry services. So definitely, this has to be included in the operation agreement. What is your approach? I think you have to tell us. Mr. Chairman, we could explain further the arrangement. The whole purpose of renting out commercial space, as you put it, is that in future, in our license issuing process, we will have to consider that as part of the revenue. It will count towards the entire account. Well, then you have to make it very clear to members, because we don't quite follow now. You may say that you rent out all the spaces, and then the rent will be used directly to subsidize the ferry services. It's fine, but you just have to let us know what exactly you plan to do. Well, in the paper we will explain the arrangement to you, but I think the whole idea is to cross-subsidize ferry services. Members, it's now 1 p.m. I think we've had detailed discussion. So, Department, please provide supplementary information. And of course, we must first go to the Public Works Subcommittee. I hope members will just give your views on the works project itself at the PWSC meeting. If there are no further questions, that's the end of discussion for this item. We have nothing under any other business, so the meeting is adjourned. If I may just remind members, the date of next meeting would be on the 21st of June, 10:45 a.m. Okay?